The content of this program represents the opinions, research, and observation of the host and his assessment of scientific evidence available at this time. None of the statements, claims, techniques, dietary guidelines, or supplements mentioned in this program have been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. The information contained herein is for educational purposes only. It is not a substitute for standard care provided by medical practitioners. Any application of the advice presented here is at the listener's own discretion or risk. The information should not be used for self-diagnosis or application. Always consult a qualified healthcare professional before beginning any new nutritional, exercise, or lifestyle improvement program. The host and this station disclaim any responsibility for any adverse effects arising from the use or application of information contained in this program. Now broadcasting from his Nutritional Command Center deep in the heart of Victoria, Texas, charging through the swamp of misconceptions, deception, and myths, bringing to you the newest cutting-edge scientific-based nutrition information so you can enjoy whole spectrum health. Here's the paladin of nutrition and whole foods expert, Labron Allen.
From deep in the heart of FEMA Region 6, otherwise known as Victoria, Texas, I'm your host, Labron Allen, and this is Health Alert. Good Saturday morning to you. Here's what's in the health news. New study, baby boomers' health very poor and getting worse. Well, of course, I'm sure we are all thankful for socialized healthcare because now this terrible problem will obviously become better. Here's what the study has to say. The baby boomer generation's overall health has been on a sharp decline. From out of Australia, Australian researchers from 3 universities had completed the first stage of a report on the generation born between the end of the Second World War and the mid-1960s. The largest problem for baby boomers, and no pun intended, is obesity. Obesity among baby boomers is more than double the rate of their parents at the same age. Well, I wonder why that is. Certainly not because of the garbage that they're shoveling down their mouths at phenomenal rates. The study went on to find that boomers with 3 or more chronic conditions were 700% greater than the previous generation. One of the professors of the studies of the University of Adelaide said that the findings were alarming and evidence that new public policies were needed. The quote, "We have to do something now in terms of reducing obesity as a risk factor if we're going to manage health costs into the future." But I think more importantly, if baby boomers are going to be able to lead active and productive lives in their later years. So, they always seem to think that throwing more money at a problem is going to solve it, and that really has absolutely nothing to do with it, because it's going to be ultimately up to the choice of these baby boomers whether or not they are going to choose health or eating garbage. Unfortunately, most will continue to choose eating garbage. Hopefully, you are not in that group. Biofarms to integrate vaccines, pharmaceuticals, into GMO biopharmaceutical corporations. Now, this is very, very odd news. Sounds like science fiction. But these are the admitted future plans of major biotechnology companies. From a particular biotech company known as Patogene, the officials from actually faced jail time back in 2002 for contaminating traditional food supplies with biopharmaceutical crops that were growing pharmaceuticals and vaccine components associated with AIDS, diabetes, and diarrhea. The Patogene company and this GMO contamination actually contaminated 500,000 bushels of soy with their biopharmaceutical corn that contained pharmaceutical and vaccine components associated with deadly diseases. The company was slapped with a minor $500,000 fine by the USDA. Well, as it turns out, the pharmaceutical crops were actually mixed in with traditional crops, and unknowing farmers had already been planted for human consumption. Of course, the USDA claims that it's safeguarding our health because all the crops were confiscated. Well, I'm sure they were. So just keep in mind that when you eat these grains in particular, that they could also contain hidden nanoscale vaccinations, antibiotics, antidepressants, or really any form of pharmaceutical drug. In fact, one California-based company has even created a spermicidal corn to be used as a mass contraceptive. Let's have more of the GMO foods. News headline, Typhoid dud, vaccine failure warning. This is from the BBC. More than 700,000 people recently immunized against typhoid may not have full protection because of a dud vaccine that has now been recalled, say the so-called experts. Manufacturer Sanfoe Pasteur MSD has recalled 88% of its stock, 16 batches, of Typhim VI vaccine because tests found some samples were too weak. Goes on to say that anyone immunized with the vaccine since January 2011 could be affected. So that certainly helps give you complete and utter confidence in your vaccinations. And remember, if you're vaccinated, why be concerned about those who aren't? Because you are safe. And who cares about the recent studies coming out that those who are vaccinated with the flu vaccine are many times more likely to acquire Alzheimer's. News headline, modern wheat, a perfect chronic poison, doctors say. This out of CBS News goes on to say that modern wheat is a perfect chronic poison, according to Dr. William Davis, a cardiologist who has published a book all about the world's most popular grain. Dr. Davis said that the wheat we eat these days isn't the wheat your grandma had. In fact, it's an 18-inch tall plant created by genetic research in the 1960s and 70s. He went on to say on the CBS show This Morning, this thing has many new features nobody ever told you about, such as there's a new protein in this thing called gliadin. It's not gluten. I'm not addressing people with gluten sensitivities and celiac disease. Let me repeat that statement that he just made. He said, I'm not addressing people with gluten sensitivities and celiac disease. Now, do you remember in shows past how many times I have gone over the dangers of grains, and especially wheat, because of gliadin, and that it had nothing to do with diagnosed celiac disease? Now, this cardiologist, Dr. Davis, Dr. William Davis, is saying exactly the same thing. He goes on to say, I'm talking about everybody else. Let me repeat that again. I'm talking about everybody else because everybody else is susceptible to gliadin protein that is an opiate. The gliadin protein is an opiate. This thing binds into the opiate receptors in your brain and in most people stimulates appetite, such that we consume 440 more calories per day, 365 days a year. So, load up on that grain. It's good for you. Just like Ann Coulter said about Fukushima radiation. Well, talk about strange news. Here you go. Cattle now being fed cookies and candies instead of real food. Well, certainly we would want to eat the beef from these cattle, wouldn't we? Obviously, they'd be quite healthy and supplying us the nutrients that our bodies require since they're being fed cookies and candies. Maybe it's their grandparents that don't want to keep them from the wonderful sweets. Although it kills them, who cares? Just when you thought that things couldn't be any stranger, well, this is what the agricultural industry is now doing. The reason it's doing this is to slash costs and, of course, increase profits. And so they are feeding them, not brand name, but generic, super cheap processed foods, including cookies, gummy worms, chocolates, Fruit Loops. And the list goes on and on. One of the great side benefits for them, the manufacturers, and the cattle livestock corporations is that it tends to fatten up the cattle rapidly. Of course, the cattle become disease-riddled, but who cares about that? They're going to make the profit. Now, some of the problems with these things is not just that they don't have any nutrition in them, but now instead of just being full, as far as these cattle, instead of just being full of antibiotics and hormones and runoff pesticides and fertilizers, now they can be full of many more things, such as high fructose corn syrup, monosodium glutamate, hydrogenated oils, artificial flavorings, artificial colorings, artificial sweeteners like aspartame. Of course, that's good for you, right? And of course, the list would just continue on and on. You're going to have food colorings, which are known neurological toxins. If you want more information about that, just look at the research by a well-known neurologist, Dr. Blaylock. He has a tremendous amount of information about those kinds of things. So since this is October and Breast Health or Awareness Month, I thought that we would take a little time and really discuss ways in which you can truly prevent breast cancers. Would you like to know that? Would you or someone you know benefit from having knowledge of how they can truly prevent breast cancer? And it is not what is recommended over and over, especially being pushed through the Susan G. Komen non-profit, quote-unquote, organization. And if you have not heard the expose that I did a few weeks ago on the Susan G. Komen, quote-unquote, non-profit organization, then I encourage you to go to my YouTube channel and listen to episode number 22 of Health Alert. My YouTube channel is NutriDoc35. So just go to youtube.com and search in the search box NutriDoc35, and you will find Health Alert episode 22, in which I have that expose of the Susan G. Komen organization. So, preventing breast cancer. Did you realize that breast cancer is actually the second leading cause of cancer deaths in the United States for women today? In fact, it is growing at such a rate that a woman's lifetime risk has nearly tripled during the past 40 years. So now every year, about 1.3 million women will be diagnosed with breast cancer. So considering those statistics, I think that you probably agree with me that prevention is an extremely high priority, and obviously not enough has been done because breast cancer is accelerating. All right, if enough work and effort had been put on prevention for the past 40 years, it wouldn't be accelerating. Well, the problem is with prevention that, just like everything else in the health field, there are many conflicting reports. Plus, there's long-held facts that turn out to be completely erroneous, and then they cause more dismay and confusion. However, what we're going to go over the evidence that has held true. And of course, there is more being learned, and the potential for prevention is actually realistic. For example, let me just give you this factoid. It's known that breast cancer incidence varies greatly from country to country, and within the United States, it varies from area to area. Now think about that. If it's not straight across the board, it varies country to country, and within a country, area to area, then there must be something that triggers it. You get it? Let's find the triggers, remove them as much as we can, And we have gone a long way to prevent the second leading cause of cancer death in women in the United States. But first, before we get into the specifics of how to prevent breast cancer as much as you can, let's get some background information. Now, we often hear, in no small part, one of the places being from the Susan G. Komen non-profit organization, that 1 in 8 women will develop breast cancer, and that's really a rather misleading statistic. Why is that? Well, in actuality, women who live to age 90, so women who live to age 90 have a 1 in 8 lifetime risk of being diagnosed with breast cancer. Only about half of all women live that long. So already you're getting rid of 50% of that statistic. 1 in 8 will have developed breast cancer at some point in her life of the 50% who live to 90. Now, the risk of developing breast cancer starts very low in young women, and it grows with age. And so that at age 30, a woman has a 0.4% change of developing breast cancer in the next 10 years. So you understand, what's 0.4% mean to you? Well, here's what it actually means. It means 4 out of 1,000 women. So over 30-year-old women, 4 out of 1,000 have a chance of developing breast cancer by the time they're 40. At age 40, a 1.5% change. At age 50, a 2.7% change. And at age 60, a 3.8% change. And finally, at age 70, a 4.1% change. So it steadily grows as a woman ages. Now, family history does seem to be a small factor. And the reason for this is, of course, the genetic potential is always gone to. Well, it's in your genes because you have family history. Well, that's really not true. Yes, family history is a factor, but it's not the genes that are constantly being accused at fault. Now, some things such as early onset of menstruation, which early onset would be considered before the age of 12, late menopause, having no children or waiting to have children after age 30, never breastfeeding, those things have all been blamed. Dense breast tissue, fewer fat cells in the breast, age, health history, lifetime accumulation of estrogen. These are all considerations, but there are not definite absolute answers. So far, radiation is the only proven cause of breast cancer. That's right. So far, radiation is the only proven cause of breast cancer. What are mammograms? Oh, ionizing radiation. Well, that seems like a good idea to get done all the time. Instead of once a year, why not every month? After all, prevention is the best medicine. Early detection to prevent it. Of course, we'll just ionize radiation in your breast all day, but so what? Radiation's good for you, even though it's the only proven cause of breast cancer. Now, the other things that are definites are environmental toxins, hormone drugs. That's right, hormone drugs, birth control drugs, hormone replacement therapy. Those things are proven. And certain other drugs are known culprits. Now, here's an interesting factoid as well, is that more men are developing breast cancer. In fact, the stat right now is 1 man for every 100 women. So you don't have to be a woman to have breast cancer, and that rate is growing within men. So breast cancer is classified actually within 2 groups. There is non-invasive and invasive. So non-invasive breast cancer means that cancer cells have not spread to an adjacent area of the breast, so they are remaining localized in their place of origin. The most common type is ductal carcinoma, which occurs in the lining of the milk ducts. A non-invasive breast cancer may also be called stage 0 cancer. Now, invasive breast cancer, which means that the cancer cells have infiltrated or spread outside the membrane that lines a duct into the surrounding tissue. Now, when that happens, the problem is that cancer can affect other parts of the body. Now, invasive breast cancer can be stage 1, 2, 3, or 4, and depending on what stage it is depending on how advanced it is. Now, breast cancer can also be further classified according to what type of tissue it arises from. One, there are milk ducts. Ductal carcinoma is the most common type of breast cancer. There's milk-producing lobules. Lobular carcinoma originates in the lobules, subdivisions of the mammary glands where the breast milk is actually produced. And then you can have breast cancer of the connective tissue, such as the muscles, fat, and blood vessels. Now, it is rare that breast cancers originate from these tissues, but in that case, it's called sarcoma. Now, another rare form of breast cancer is called inflammatory breast cancer, also known as IBC. It's rare, sudden onset, from weeks to months, so it's quick. And it can be confused with mastitis. The affected area is often red, it's swollen, it's warm and tender. And the reason is that cancer cells have blocked the lymphatic vessels in the breast. Now, that right there is a clue as to one of the things that women can do to easily prevent breast cancer. And do you know what that is? You know what the statistics are? Statistics show that women who wear brasiers less frequently actually have less risk of breast cancer, and it declines with the least amount of wearing that particular undergarment. Now, why is that? Well, because one of the things that bras actually do is retain lymphatic fluid within the breast and doesn't allow it to clear out, to drain out properly. Now, with the inflammatory breast cancer, there are or may not be a lump. As I said earlier, it is very rare. This IBC is very rare. It only accounts for about 1 to 5% of all breast cancer cases in the United States. And it's far more common in younger women and African American women. It's very infrequent in men. Now, the most common form of breast cancer is ductal carcinoma, also known as DCIS. And it's the type that's especially on the increase. That's what's growing at a phenomenal rate, possibly because it's found more often due to the expanded screening process. DCIS is contained in the milk ducts. It hasn't spread out to the fatty breast tissue or any other part of the body. It's not large enough to be palpable, but is only picked up on a mammogram where it shows up as a little specks of calcium, which is also known as microcalcification. Well, then what you do if you find this on the mammogram is your medical doctor is going to recommend biopsy. Now, frequently at the center of the microcalcifications is a foci of a cancer that is basically debilitated or defunct. Now, do you realize what that means? That means the body has basically localized that area and nothing is happening. It's dead. It's defunct. But, of course, they still recommend radiation, chemo, surgery, whatever the case may be, because you're now a cash cow. So, again, at the center of these microcalcifications frequently is a foci of a cancer that's basically debilitated or defunct. And in fact, all that's left is a remnant which the body has effectively contained, as I said earlier. Now, before the prevalency of the mammogram screening, this diagnosis represented less than 5% of all new cases of cancer. Now, between 30 to 50% of new breast cancer diagnoses obtained through mammography are classified as DCIS. Do you get it? So basically, that form of breast cancer is not affecting really anything, and yet now it's the most frequently diagnosed and what creates a lot of horrendous issues for women because of the treatment, not because of the cancer. Now, oftentimes, most of these cases are actually treated with breast removal, certainly radiation. So do you want to subject yourself? If you have a diagnosis of DCIS, you should ask yourself, do you want to subject yourself for, within that small area of microcalcification, a foci of cancer that's now dead? I mean, that seems like a good question. Instead of being all fearful that you're going to die, that is not the kind of cancer in which that occurs. So, that's the background. What we're going to do now is go over causes. Now, I already talked about some of the risk factors that can contribute to breast cancer. But let's talk about the studies and what some of these are showing. So, many studies have actually been concluded that breast cancer is tied to estrogen exposure. And of course, the body produces major types of estrogen. There's three kinds. There's estriol, estrone, and estradiol. And estradiol is the more, quote-unquote, aggressive form of estrogen. Women have higher circulating levels of estradiol. And with those higher circulating levels of estradiol, there appears to be a higher risk of breast cancer. Now, here's the thing, though. You see, you're hearing more and more about these estrogen-based cancers, but let me ask you, aren't women supposed to have higher levels of estradiol circulating in their blood? Well, yes, that's why they're women. And so I ask you, do you think it's actually the estradiol, quote-unquote, higher levels, that is the cause? Well, let me tell you, it is not. It's actually the ratio of certain hormones that is off. It's not estradiol. And so these women who get treated for DCIS, they say, oh, well, it's estrogen-based breast cancer, so we're going to put you on this medication that blocks estrogen in your body. Well, that's really good. I mean, how stupid is that? How about what allowed the estradiol to create the problem, since there's supposed to be higher levels of estradiol circulating in women's bloodstreams? That's why they're women. And so there actually is a hormone that offsets the negative effects of estrogen, estradiol, within a woman's body. Did you know that? Would you like to know what that hormone is? It is progesterone, your own naturally occurring progesterone, and it should be in a ratio of 30 to 1, 30 times more progesterone to estrogen. And the real problem, probably one of the main problems with breast cancers, is that ratio is off, and it allows the estradiol to affect the tissues in detrimental ways. Now, another cause is that there is a little evidence that an aspect of the liver's ability or inability to break down or metabolize the estradiol, and so what happens is that the levels of estradiol can elevate because eventually the body just starts recirculating the estradiol instead of the liver being able to properly break it down or metabolize it and eliminate it. This has to do specifically through a pathway that's called a Cytochrome P450 enzyme pathway, and the only way that you can actually augment, support, and optimize this pathway is by eating certain vegetables. That's correct. Eating certain vegetables is the only way to augment this Cytochrome P450 enzyme pathway. The reason is that these certain vegetables contain phytonutrients that create what's needed within that pathway. Would you like to know what that particular form of veggie is? It's called cruciferous. What is cruciferous vegetable? It is broccoli, cauliflower, kale, Brussels sprouts, etc. A flowering head. That's what cruciferous actually means. So that's another, liver clearance. Now, another known cause I already mentioned is hormone drugs. Now, these can also include hormone-mimicking chemicals found in foods, okay, found in plastics like bisphenol A, very, very damaging, birth control, and even the prolonged intake, listen up please, the prolonged intake of DHEA, which is an easily available hormone anywhere. Health food store, many natural health clinicians give it out. There are times in which your body calls for DHEA, however, not for prolonged use and only under certain circumstances. DHEA is not a supplement. It is not a nutrient. It is a powerful hormone that has the extreme potential of offsetting your entire steroid handling system. Now, it has also been found that women who work predominantly at night actually have an increased risk of breast cancer. Prolonged exposure to light at night, typically when the melatonin levels from the pineal gland should be at the highest, is what seems to increase the risk. Now, melatonin is secreted in response to darkness. It causes sleepiness, but it also apparently affects many other parts of the body, including levels of other hormones. And so they're finding that insufficient melatonin production may actually be a contributor to the development of breast cancer. So don't work at night. Sleep in the dark. Anything that has a standby light in your bedroom, either get rid of it or cover it. It's very damaging. They're finding that overweight seems to be a predominant risk. Could be because overweight women tend to produce more estrogen within the fat cells. And there are certain genetic mutations that seem to be creating it. Other causes: a huge array of toxic environmental chemicals seem to be causes of breast cancer. Would you like to have an idea of what? Well, let's see. There's various pesticides, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. What the heck is that? Let me repeat that. Polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. Well, hello. Some of those are actually used in all those wonderful air fresheners that you have in your home, or the candles that you love to burn, or the Febreze that you love to spray. Yes, those contain polycystic aromatic hydrocarbons. Just suck that in, and let's hope for some good old breast cancer. No? Instead, how about not using those toxic chemicals in your environment and taking your health seriously? There are various solvents: DDT, polyvinyl chloride, bisphenol A, which I already mentioned, polychlorinated bisphenols, dioxin, flame retardants, ethylene oxide, parabens. Parabens are from candles. They're in many, many different substances, toiletries that you buy. Do not buy things with parabens in them. Look at the ingredients label first. Phthalates, food additives, methylmercury. Where would we get methylmercury? Let's see, methylmercury. Oh, high fructose corn syrup. 90% of high fructose corn syrup has high levels of methylmercury and lead. Okay, what else? Oh, flu vaccines. Flu vaccines contain methylmercury as a preservative because it's a wonderful preservative, kills everything, including yourself, but who cares? However, they don't call it methylmercury. So if you go in and you ask your medical doctor, hey, does this flu vaccine that you're about ready to stick in my shoulder contain methylmercury? He'll say, oh, absolutely not. Well, that's because they just simply renamed the methylmercury into thimerosal. Yeah, thimerosal is methylmercury, and it is definitely in flu vaccines. Okay. What else? Let's see, methylmercury. Oh, smoking. Of course, that's politically incorrect anyway, so no one has a problem with that. What about living near nuclear facilities? That's right, just living near them. By the way, did you know that there's a nuclear power plant in Austin? Yes, University of Austin actually has one. Incinerators, landfills, Superfund sites, paper mills, gas stations. Live near a gas station, you got the hydrocarbon, see. Chemical factories. Well, we certainly in this area don't live around any chemical factories. Or the next one, industrial agriculture, airports, mining operations, electrical substations, golf courses. Do you live on the golf course and country clubs? Yeah, much higher increased risk of breast cancer. So is that view worth it? Let's see. Nitrogen dioxide, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. I already talked about that. Benzene. Benzene is in many things. It's in dry cleaning fluid. Also, it may be in your toothpaste for sensitive teeth because it tends to deaden nerves. So I wouldn't use that. Now, other things, because of the chemical content or what causes the chemicals, would be cooking foods at high temperatures. Specifically, that process causes the formation of heterocyclic amines, or they're also known as HAs, which are linked directly to breast cancer. Specifically, grilled salmon can contain high amounts of HAs that have been shown to cause specific breast cancer gene mutation. The parabens that I mentioned earlier, specifically what they are synthetic antifungal preservatives. They're typically used in cosmetics. There's at least 13,000, literally 13,000 different cosmetics and personal care products, including deodorants, that contain these toxic chemicals. So, air fresheners you should get out of your home. Any kind of products for mold, mildew control. Organochlorine pesticides, which are commonly used in homes, construction materials, furnishings, plastic computer housing. Those particular form of pesticides are usually used on golf courses, even lawns. Any hormone disrupting plasticizers that are absorbed from auto industrial exhausts. Yeah, just being in your car, driving around. Specific furnishings like carpets, sofas, new car interiors, construction materials, all common forms of plastics, polyvinyl, acrylic, styrofoam, styrene. Do not use styrofoam cups, guys. Do not use it. If that's the only thing that's available at the convenience store or the coffee shop that you're at, just simply go somewhere else. Don't drink it. Because when you put something heated, especially in styrofoam, you're just asking for problems. Don't knowingly, willingly, happily ask for problems. So if you actually remove those things, are careful about what you eat, because what you eat has a huge impact in the hormonal balance. You can go a long way towards preventing breast cancer. So our next free house seminar is going to be on Tuesday, November the 13th at 7 p.m. You need to RSVP by calling area code 361-575-4683. Do it now. Ask for Tanya. Again, that will be Tuesday, November the 13th at 7 p.m. Now, for feedback, comments, questions, you can always get a hold of me through my email at radiocomments@healthimprovementprograms.com. Again, that's radiocomments@healthimprovementprograms.com. Well, that's it for this week, folks. I'm Ray Brunellen, your host, and this is Health Alert.